Welcome back to my channel, everyone. I'm Charles from Charles in Photography, and this morning it's around 6:45 and we're in the upper reaches of the Pine River, about 2/3 of the way up to Mount Glorious. So this tutorial is all about how to photograph waterfalls and also water in motion. Now, quite a few people think that when we come to waterfalls, the first thing we do is put an ND filter on our camera to slow the motion down. Well, I beg to differ. I feel the first thing you should do is actually put a polarizing filter on there. That is because you can see the water's flowing and all that, and you actually want to control the brightness. So with a polarizer, you can actually sort of get that middle bit that's blown out. Just like if you put sunglasses, if you go out to a waterfall or to a bright area, you'll actually see the detail, and that's what a polarizer does in this situation. So this morning, that's all I've got on my camera at the start. I may put an ND filter on after, but we're going to start just with a polarizer. Let's get cracking and we'll take some photos. I've got my camera set up, my polarizer filter on. I'm also shooting with my Samsung S10, just so you can actually see what I'm photographing. And you can see, this is about the way that I've actually framed my shot. Now, in an ideal world, I'd actually be about 1 meter to 1.5 meters to my left here, but the problem is it's just a very steep trench here. It's just way too dangerous. So camera gear, Nikon D500, my Tokina 11 to 20mm, and I'm shooting at 20mm. Now, I also brought my Nikon 18 to 140, but I really don't think I'll use it today. The reason being is that although I'm shooting at 20mm here, I'm at the maximum focal length for this lens. If I want to zoom out a bit, if I had the Nikon, I'd be stuck at 18. This one, I could actually get more of what's in front of me here if I wanted to. So this is why I'm actually shooting with the Tokina. Now, my camera settings are ISO 100. No need to go higher than ISO 100. My white balance. Some people like shooting in auto white balance. Well, that's fine if you're shooting in RAW, because you can adjust your white balance when you're back home, when you're processing your image. But if you're shooting in JPEG, then auto white balance is very risky, because the sun's going to start coming up here, it's going to start getting a bit lighter. We could get a light difference. The colors might change. So if you've set to auto white balance, the colors could change from shot to shot. I prefer to actually fix my white balance. So my white balance setting for today is cloudy, just to give me a bit more warmth in the image. I could have used sunny or daylight or shade, but I tried them and the shade was just a bit too warm, daylight a bit too cool. So this is why I've chosen the cloudy profile. Now, I'm shooting in manual mode, so to give me the best of both worlds, so I can actually adjust my shutter speed and my aperture. If you're shooting in aperture priority here, you would actually find that you'd most likely have to use exposure compensation. And I'm going to do a tutorial just on exposure compensation, what it is, how it affects your camera in the very near future. But today, I'm shooting in manual mode. And my settings are around ½ a second at f11. And I've actually focused right in the middle of the waterfall, where you actually saw the water drop down. And I've actually set the polarizer to neutral, and I'll take 2 photos now to actually show you what I mean. Before I take the photo, I've actually got the camera set up on the 2-second timer delay. That means I'm not going to get any camera shake at all. So we focus, that's it. I'm really happy. Now, these are really just test shots, right? Okay. Now take a good look at this photo, and now we're actually going to set the polarizer. I'm actually using a Nissi polarizer here. Look at the difference. Night and day. This is without the polarizer, and this is with the polarizer. For me, a polarizer is more important than an ND filter in this situation. Yes, if you're shooting a bit more daylight, you'll still need the ND filter, because the more light that's on here, the more you'll actually need to bring that light down. But very early morning like this, 7 o'clock, I think that we're going to do just fine with the polarizer. I've also got here my Hader 6-stop ND filter. So let's see how we go. Now, I actually quite like this way of the frame, and before we go down the longer exposure route, I'll actually show you, like, this actually looks quite good already, but what happens if we actually speed up the water a little bit? So I've changed my shutter speed to 1/10 of a second. Now I actually have to change my aperture to match. And now I'm down to f5. No need to reset my focus, it's all locked. And this is the beauty also with back button focusing, that once it's actually locked on, there's no need to touch it. Now, if you haven't set back button focusing, once you've actually set focus, you should disengage autofocus mode. This camera has a lever on the side here that I can disengage autofocus. My lens also has a push-pull that I can actually disengage autofocus. Because if you don't do that, every time you press the shutter button, it's going to refocus. And if you put a very strong ND filter on, it will struggle to actually read the focus. So bear that in mind. Let's take a look at our photo here. This looks really nice. Look at the difference. Can you see that we're actually getting a bit more flow? Now, I don't want to go any lower than f5, but I still want to increase my shutter speed a little bit. And the only way I can do that is by raising my ISO. So we'll raise the ISO. I'll take it up to ISO 400. Now I can easily raise my shutter speed to 1/60th. Now, can you see in this photo, there's actually nearly a freeze frame. This is too slow, and this is the photo that you'd most likely get during the day without an ND filter. This is why normally when we're photographing waterfalls, we come very early in the morning or later in the afternoon. Now, this waterfall is actually exposed to the elements. There's no tree canopy above it. Now, about a month and a half ago, we went to Curtis Falls with a mate, and it was a pleasure photographing there, even around 10 o'clock in the morning, because most of the area is grown. It's a rainforest, so we don't have that direct sunlight in the creek and near the waterfall. So we're actually able to get some nice photos. Here, it's about 7:05 now. If I came at around 8:30, the sun would be over the trees here, and I would get very harsh light. And even with an ND filter, I would really struggle to actually get the photos that I want. So bear that in mind. Now, to actually show you what it looks like if we slow the motion down more, I'll actually put my ND filter on. So as you can see, I've actually put my slot filter on. I've got the Hader 6-stop ND filter. Now, my last shot was 1/5 of a second. This shot is going to be 15 seconds. You might wonder, how do I know? Well, it's a 6-stop ND filter, so it means I've got 6 stops of light that I've got to catch up on. And every time you turn the back dial on your camera, you're adjusting your camera by default by 1/3 of a stop. So what I've done is just multiplied 6 by 3, which means 18 clicks on the back wheel here. And that's exactly what I've done. So we'll take a photo. So this is the 15-second photo that you can see now. Now, this is 1/5 of a second. When you just look at it, it doesn't really look too much difference because our exposure is right. All we've done is just extend that exposure. Look at the water. In the 15th second, you can see that the water is really nice, silky smooth. And this one here, there's just a little bit more flow. That looks nice, but to me, 15 seconds is just too long. If I wanted to go halfway between this, let's bring my aperture down to f8. So now, instead of 15 seconds, we're at 8 seconds. We take a photo. When you're using the RGB highlights to view your photo, you can easily see if you've got areas in your image that are overexposed because they'll be blinking. A lot of people just call them blinkies. And I can see here that it's slightly blinking in 2 spots. One at the base of the falls and one about halfway up. But the rest of the image is actually well exposed. Sometimes you sort of have to choose, you know, like 50-50. Have a little bit of overexposed because it's right in the white water area there, but try to get the rest of the image exposed correctly. Now, I'm pretty happy with all the photos I've taken here. Let's quickly just reframe our shot just to get more of the bottom here. So We'll come down. Now in every video that I do, I always talk about composition, because you may be in the most beautiful place in the world, but think about what you want. Whenever I go out somewhere, I actually really consider what I want. I've got an idea in my head what I want, and today when I came here, even though I'd been here, but I was actually up the top, when I actually set my gear up, I actually moved it around. I just used my phone, took some phone pics and looked at like, where is going to be the best composition? And like I said at the start, the best composition is actually right over where the water goes over the edge. Just too dangerous. So I'm as close as I can to my best composition. Now I've reframed it here, and I just wanted to see if I could actually get a little bit of this rock face here that's on the side in my image, and I've just snuck it in. If I went further than this, I'm actually going to lose part of the waterfall. So this looks really good. We've sort of framed the waterfall with all these rocks around. Now you might wonder, why am I shooting portrait orientation? Why not shoot in landscape orientation? Well, we'll quickly turn the camera around and I'll show you this very quickly. So as you can see, I've rotated the camera. We're in landscape orientation now. And the first thing I did before taking a photo is I've actually adjusted my polarizing filter. When you're using filters, you have to think about this when you're moving your camera around, because the polarizing filter was set up to photograph in portrait orientation. But now with the rotation, I've actually readjusted the polarizer. And take a look at this video that I'm actually shooting at the moment. There's so much rock face and the waterfall is taking so little. This gives you an idea of what we're photographing. My settings are still ISO 100, f8, 6 seconds. And I've actually set my focus point on the waterfall. We'll take a shot. Now it's around 7:45 and I can see now the sun is just starting to peek through these trees. This is why I got here so early in the morning. This looks really nice. The blinkers are there a little bit, but look at the shot. The waterfall is only taking up about 1/4 of my frame. The rest is covered with rock face. I'm not saying not to shoot a scene like this. By all means, when we come out to places like this, don't just settle for one composition. Take a few compositions so that when you get home, you edit your photos, or if you're just shooting in JPEG and you're sharing them, you've actually got more than one type of image to share. Move yourself around a bit. Then when you get home, you can actually choose which is the best one. I set myself up here this morning because this was what I felt the best composition for what I wanted. But before I was going to go home, I was still going to take an image like this because it gives me a feel of what I was actually seeing on the day. And I could share to my friends saying, well, this is what it actually looked like. It was a very deep hole, but there was a lot of rocks around. So that's a wrap for today. Thank you for watching. I hope this tutorial has given you an idea of actually how to photograph waterfalls, moving water, the importance of a polarizer, and to show that an ND filter isn't that a necessity, but to me, a polarizer is. If you found value in this tutorial, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if there's a photography topic that you'd like me to cover, leave it in the comment box below. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.